Hello indie game fans, turn-based tactics titles have quite a long lineage, dating back to games like original XCOM and Fire Emblem, where indie teams and mid-sized studios have continued to carry the mantle into the modern age. So here's a look at 15 of the best that you can play right now. Do note that I have covered more SRPG titles like Final Fantasy Tactics with job systems and so forth in another video, link in the top right, so be sure to watch that as well if you have not. Let's begin with Dark Deity, one of the new entries on the list since it was released in June this year. If you're at all familiar with this genre, I'm sure that you'll see the Fire Emblem inspiration from the overworld combat interface, the zoom in to combat when a unit attacks, and the relationship systems between characters.
This would make for a fine tale.
It's a fairly well-made title, but does go down a well-trodden path, so don't expect anything too crazy. One of the titles that certainly benefited from modern game development is Pathway, a roguelite tactics title with a setting that seems to be heavily inspired by Indiana Jones. You are roaming around North Africa in the 1930s, exploring and seeking treasure, but danger abounds, with Nazis and the occult getting into the mix. At launch in 2019, there were a number of complaints with the overall balance and flow of the game, so it did sit at mixed reviews on Steam for quite a while, but the developers have since taken community feedback into account and released a patch which fixed most of the issues. As such, I do think that it's worth a look, if only for the interesting setting and gorgeous pixel art, but there are some clever ideas as well.
From the moment I understood. And you will beg my kind to save you. But I am already saved. For the machine is immortal.
Our first not-so-indie title is Warhammer 40k Mechanicus, one that comes to us from a small team in French developer Bulwark Studios, but is of course using the Warhammer IP. You play as the Adeptus Mechanicus, a faction of tech priests that seek to replace their own weak flesh with mechanical augmentation, aspiring to become more robot than human, with a great number of upgrade and customization options, making it a great tactics title even if you did not start off as a 40k fan. An indie game that still holds up to this day is Xenonauts from 2014, one that will look familiar to older viewers on the channel, since it does look similar to the original XCOM games rather than the modern Phyrexis entries. It has a bit of an X-Files kind of vibe as well, being set in the Cold War time period, so no super soldier suits or the like, although you are still able to harness alien technology. If you're a fan of the XCOM series, both the old and new games, and have not played this, do yourself a favour and pick this up. Another new game that made the cut is Wildermyth, the self-styled myth-making tactics title that plays with the concept of leaving a legacy. You create a hero and take them through multiple pre-made campaigns, engaging in classic turn-based tactical combat, and thus have a fantastic papercraft look. However, it adds in random events and choose your own adventure style choices, affecting relationships between characters as you make the various decisions. Time is also a factor, where heroes can grow old and die, but they can also have children to take up the mantle, which does lend itself to the epic ambition of this game. As such, this is among the notable releases of this year, so do pick this up if you have not.
Something strange is going on all across the zone. Ghouls are disappearing and getting replaced by copies, but they're made out of plants. I call them pod ghouls. I've walked from one end of this wasteland to the other. I don't fear nothing.
One of the best games from 2018 is Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden, one that had freeform stealth exploration before snapping into turn-based tactics combat, where the atmosphere, creatures and central mystery are simply excellent. You have a squad of mutants who can evolve as they level up, unlocking new abilities which are varied and add to combat, which will definitely be needed since this is pretty brutal in terms of difficulty.
The other has come for the chosen one. And soon, the veil will break. Suffering's coming will rupture reality.
Welcome to our reality.
Monochrome with a splash of red can be gorgeous if done right, and one such example is the roguelite tactics title Othercide. This is a super stylish game where you control the Daughters, birthed from humanity's greatest warrior, as they seek to combat a great evil. The timeline manipulation system is fascinating to wrap your head around, with some heart-wrenching tactical decisions to be made as well, since you can sacrifice one unit to heal another, for example, being another standout title from last year. This one may be a little bit of a hidden gem since Troubleshooter Abandoned Children is from a South Korean developer and has not gotten that much mainstream coverage, but evidently, from the footage, is a modern XCOM style tactics game which is excellent. You play as troubleshooters, essentially vigilantes commissioned by the government in order to take down criminals, where the sheer variety of characters and special abilities is the highlight. The character portraits and art, while not classically anime in quotes, still looks pretty good, and add to that the fact that it comes to us from a developer from a non-conventional country gives this a spot on the list.
Broken world. Danger does not wait its turn. Except it does. It's turn-based. Join Rogue Captain Piper Faraday and face the challenges of the vast frontier.
With the relatively recent moves between Image and Form and the Thunderful group, you might be surprised to know that the Steamworld people are no longer a small indie team and do actually have quite the financial muscle, so a not-so-indie entry of interest is Steamworld Heist. This is a very unconventional pick in the sense that it is a side-scrolling turn-based tactics title rather than a top-down grid-based entry, but the tactics combat with an element of skill certainly makes it very different. As such, for how unique it is, it gets a spot and is a nice alternative to the rest of the games on this list.
Things will explode! Turn up the steam for the heist of the century!
I talked about games like Final Fantasy Tactics in the previous video, but didn't have quite enough games to make a list of games like Advance Wars, where number 1 on the list would probably be Wargroove, even if it is fantasy rather than modern military. For those of you not familiar, rather than having unique characters like Fire Emblem or procedurally generated ones like XCOM, you're instead able to pump out generic units, where the composition of your army is critical in the strategy since combat has a rock-paper-scissors style system.
Brace yourself!
Since launch, the developers have released one free DLC, and me being me, has a special place in my heart due to the wonderful pixel art. Unfortunately, it's coming to almost 3 years since launch, and the multiplayer community is not as vibrant as it once was, but the main campaign is substantial, with additional puzzle modes and even a level editor to keep you playing.
Several days ago, the sun simply came to a stop in the sky.
We fool ourselves believing that peace will last.
Some of you may be surprised to learn that developer Stoic, who made the Banner Saga trilogy, is actually a not-so-indie team with about 45 people on their team, but in hindsight, I suppose that explains the gorgeous visuals and almost old-school Disney movie-style cutscenes. I believe this was a Kickstarter title way back when, with the developers splitting the game into 3 parts over 4 years, becoming an epic story of its own with various twists and turns. It is truly a beloved game for good reason, making it a no-brainer pick.
How did it come to this?
It all went wrong. It was an ambush. You were left in command.
One of the titles with quite a cult following is Battle Brothers, a medieval mercenary company management sim that always impresses with the large-scale battles, as every single mercenary is represented on the battlefield. This has a sandbox open-world structure where you are free to explore, choosing who to hire and what missions to take on. There is an element of fantasy with monsters like zombies and skeletons, but the sheer amount of systems which affect combat is just impressive. Since launch in 2017, the developers have released a number of paid DLCs on quite a steady cadence of 1 per year, the latest of which is Blazing Deserts in 2020, which means even more content for fans of the game.
As long as there is blood coursing through our veins, as long as we can hold sword and shield in hand, there shall stand the Battle Brothers!
5人の若いスタントマンがある日自分たちのテレビスタジオを制作しようと考えた。これが君のストーリーの始まりである。インディー戦隊クロマスクワッド。
Let's kick off the top 3 with Chroma Squad, one of the games that I missed out on my last video since it is somehow region locked in Singapore and did not appear when I was checking Steam, but I made a mental note to give it its due in the next iteration. This is a very meta tactics title, which will be familiar to fans of Japanese Sentai shows like Power Rangers. You're playing as stuntmen who decided to create their own show, gathering actors and props in order to film the next episode of your TV show. I love the pixel art, theme and combat system, which does have combo attacks and even appearances of Megazords, certainly evoking my personal childhood nostalgia. Another hidden gem that I absolutely love is Skulls of the Shogun, an older title from 2013 set in the afterlife where you play as a samurai betrayed and murdered who then has to get his revenge. One of the interesting things about this game is that there's no grid and units are free to move in a radius, and positioning is especially important since units can get pushed off cliffs. The upgrade system, from consuming the skulls of your enemies, is also a great risk-reward system since going for skulls may leave you open to counter-attacks, all wrapped up with a wonderful hand-drawn art style. And of course, the king of the tactics titles for me personally still remains Into the Breach, a procedurally generated tactics title from the creators of FTL Faster Than Light, a two-person team with contractors that are just amazing at game design. You play as mech pilots fighting off the alien Vac, recreating Pacific Rim to some extent, as your squad of 3 enters into various combat scenarios. It is intentionally limited to an 8x8 grid, but don't let that fool you, the strategizing in this game is second to none. That is because all the intended enemy actions are presented to you, so it is up to you to plan around that, pushing and pulling enemies so that they attack each other, miss, or cause some form of combo which is beneficial to you. The variety of pre-made mechs are excellent, with some great in-run upgrade options as well, and is still my favourite title, taking the #1 spot. For more tactics titles, watch these videos and I will see you after the jump.